Hello, this is Fumi, your local mold. Today we will be talking about the ubiquity of microorganisms. Join me in today's experiment and discussion as I explain the importance of hand washing and safe food handling. So first, we'll start off with the experiment. For this experiment, these are the materials that I used. I used 6 pieces of bread, boiled water transferred into a spray bottle, 6 Ziplocs, plastic gloves, alcohol, soap, and tape and marker for labeling. So each piece of bread was sprinkled with the water and handled according to the instruction, which I will explain later, and placed in the Ziplocs and labeled. So this was the setup for the breads. The setup was as follows. For setup A, it was the control bread, so it was untouched, and I used clean hands and gloves to handle the bread when I sprayed it and put it in the Ziploc. For setup B, this was bread touched with unwashed hands. Setup C was bread touched with hand washed with water only. Setup D was bread touched with hand washed with water and soap. Setup E was bread touched with hand washed with water, soap, and alcohol. And F, bread touched with hand sanitized with alcohol only. So I prepared the bread in this order, B, C, F, D, A, from dirtiest to cleanest, in order not to contaminate any of the cleaner setups. So I'm not sure if this may have affected the outcome, but I will note that anyway. So this order was actually my hypothesis for this experiment, which is that the first bread to develop mold would be bread B, since it is the bread touched with unwashed hands, and the last being bread A, which is the control bread. So I found a place in my room where I could observe the bread and take pictures of them every day until I observed mold growth. So let's go through the day-by-day observations. So for days 1 to 5, the bread was the same. I didn't observe any mold growth on any of the bread. So here's day 1. This is the initial setup. You can see I lined it up and labeled them, and nothing has happened yet. Here is day 2 to 5, so I didn't observe any changes. There was no visible mold growth as well. This is day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5. So more or less they look the same to me. However, I did start to notice mold on day 6. So here's day 6. Yay! There is some mold. There was mold on the water and soap bread, which is bread D, as well as some on the unwashed bread, bread B. So far, there was no observable mold on the other bread. So the strangest thing about this is that there was the most mold on the control bread, bread A. So I'm not sure if this was a problem with the packaging or a mistake on my part, because I expected bread B to have the most mold the earliest. But so far, the most mold was seen on breads A and B, with some on B. Here's some close-up pictures of them. You can see here, the A untouched bread has mold, and the B bread has some mold, but not as much as in breads A and D. So next is day 7. Day 7 was more or less the same. There was no mold to be seen yet on the other bread, though it seems that the mold on breads A, B, and D did grow. Here are some close-up pictures. You can see I just encircled the mold on bread B because it was a bit small. So that's the end of my observation. It seems my experiment didn't go exactly as planned, but my hypothesis was incorrect. However, bread C, E, and F have not developed mold yet, so that might be a good sign. So I believe some factors may have influenced the results, and these could be number 1, which is a mistake on my part, such as mishandling of the bread or a problem with my setup order. So I'm not sure if doing it in the order of A, B, C, D, E, F would have influenced it. Though I did have a system and I made sure to follow instructions, but oh well, there is always room for human error. Another factor could be sanitization issues and existing microorganisms such as in the Ziploc and the gloves. So now that the experiment is done, let's move on to a very short discussion to supplement the experiment. What was that experiment all about, and what was the point? Well, to answer those, we have even more questions to answer. which are number one, what are microorganisms? Number two, how does mold occur? And number three, why do we need to wash our hands, especially when preparing or handling food? So first, we'll start with microorganisms. Microorganisms are very small organisms that can only be seen through a microscope. Such organisms include bacteria, fungi, and more. In some cases, viruses may also be considered microorganisms. Mold is a fungi, which I did mention is a microorganism, and these occur in damp environments and reproduces through spores, which are airborne. So they digest and then decay the organic material that it grows on. So now why do we need to wash our hands when preparing or handling food? Simply to avoid bacteria and any microorganism growth on the food. Furthermore, it can stop germs from spreading and prevent problems such as salmonella and cross-contamination. So some typical symptoms reported from mold exposure include respiratory problems such as wheezing and asthma attacks, nasal and sinus congestion or dry hacking cough, and eye, nose, and skin irritations. These include rashes, burnings, etc., as well as nervous system um, problems such as headaches, memory loss, and mood changes, and also aches and pains. Furthermore, mold can produce toxic chemicals called mycotoxins, which can cause diseases depending on the amount and length of exposure and the health and age of the individual. And that is why you always need to wash your hands, since we can't always see these problems since they are microscopic. So some tips to proper hand washing in the kitchen include number one, washing your hands before, during, and after handling food. Number two, always washing with at least soap and water, so don't forget to wash the backs of your hands, between your fingers, and under your nails. Also, rinse your hands with clean water and dry them with a clean towel or air dry them. So the experiment didn't go exactly as planned, but I hope despite that you somehow learned something. So anyway, don't forget to always wash your hands for healthier and safer food preparation. Thank you very much for listening. Here are my references. Thank you. Goodbye.